Hello, everybody. Road Warriors 627 here, and welcome back to One Turn Route. This is episode number 2, and the first real proper one because it's my first one with a guest. And that guest is Jack Sargent of Racing Rundown. We're going to interview him today, and we're going to learn a lot from him in regards to what he does inside horse racing and what he likes to bet in racing. So, Jack, please introduce yourself. It's great to have you here.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me the invitation, Andrew, and happy to come on, and we'll get going on this.
Yep, sounds good. I'm going to break this video up into 4 different parts. We're going to ask you boring, generic questions. Then we're going to ask you a little more interesting questions. Then we're going to talk a little about the Eclipse Awards, and then we're going to finally get to know Jack a little bit more by the speed round at the end. So let's start out here with the boring questions, or the generic questions. The first one that a lot of people ask is, what got you interested in racing? So that'll be the first one.
Well, it's very fitting that this is in the boring question category because this is definitely going to be a very boring answer. Uh, not a lot of variety in terms of what my answer is coming from. I got into racing like really heavily following the 2015 Triple Crown. I had always been surrounded by racing because my birthday's in May, so the Kentucky Derby very often does fall on my birthday. But the Triple Crown in 2015 really got me completely, fully invested in the sport. So not very original, but that a lot of us probably have a similar story like that.
That's probably the second most common answer behind it was my dad. That was mine. So I was even more common than you. It's okay. That's a very good story, and it's nice to see that something like that, actually something really positive that happened, cemented your interest, and then that's a great thing to hear. So, as a lot of people know, you have a YouTube channel and a podcast, Racing Rundown. It's doing great. How did you come about starting that with Eric? And was it mainly the racing aspect or the broadcasting aspect?
Well, I started Racing Rundown back toward the end of 2018, and I would say it's kind of a little bit of both. I had always wanted to have something that to do where I could talk about a particular sport, and I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted it to be, but I had the inclination that toward the end of 2015, following the Breeders' Cup, that I kind of had a resurgence in my interest in horse racing, and that divulged into creating Racing Rundown, and then Racing Rundown turned uh, into something that was a little bit casual, kind of. I don't want to call it was just me kind of BSing, but it very quickly turned into reasonable talking. And I did it by myself for the better part of the first year. And then actually the ironic thing is I got my co-host, Andrew kind of referenced him, Eric. I brought him on just after Breeders' Cup 2019, and it was because I was stricken with laryngitis the week of Breeders' Cup, and I could not do a single preview on YouTube for anything. So I had to ask a couple of my friends if there was someone that they knew that could help me out with this, and he just happened to be the person that volunteered to help me out with it. And he was so good, and I was so impressed with what he was able to do for me that I decided to bring him on full time. So, and we're now entering year 3. So I guess to answer the question, kind of half and half.
Okay, that's fantastic. And what are you working towards? Are you trying to use this show to get more involved in the broadcasting side of horse racing, or are you working towards something else as both you and I grow up?
You know, I always keep all my options open. I don't really know that I'm working towards anything specific. I know one thing that I'm doing it right now and it's working out really well. So uh, that's a very good thing. And whatever ends up happening is what ends up happening. If it takes me into horse racing full time, then that's great. If it takes me elsewhere, then that's great as well. The good thing about this is that it gives me a lot of options going forward. And so I guess to be determined as to whether or not I'm using this as a springboard to racing or elsewhere. But, definitely something in the broadcast field is definitely most likely in the future.
That's fantastic, man. That's great. All right, now we're going to move on to the more interesting questions, more specific questions. So, you make a lot of videos, you make a lot of previews, you do a great job with them. I watch pretty much every single one. Of all the ones you've made, is there one where you absolutely nailed the outcome of a race, or what's the biggest score you've ever had?
Well, I think the biggest score I've ever had on the channel was last year in the Kentucky Derby when I threw in a threw in a line in my big 2019 Kentucky Derby preview that Country House was the big long shot horse of that year's Kentucky Derby, and I did end up personally making a play on that. So I did profit off of my own line of thinking, but that's probably the biggest hit that I've had overall. In terms of last year, 2020, the best hit that I had was Fire at Will in the Pilgrim. So those I think would be the two best plays that I've had. My co-host has a lot more of those big price hits because he's a little bit more reckless than I am. I do pick against favorites, but I'm not one that's taking shots every single race with double digit horses. And not that Eric is either, but I'm a little bit more reserved in certain cases. So there's not a lot of huge in terms of lighting up the board hits that I've had, but I have had a couple.
Well, those are the ones we all want, and we wish we could have one of those every day, at least every month. Of course, that doesn't happen, but we try. Kind of a follow up to that. Is there a race that seems like every year that you really key in on and get right? I guess for me it would kind of be the Belmont Stakes. I tend to have the first or the second one every year. What about you?
I mean, I guess you could say the Belmont Stakes would be that race for me as well, given that I felt that my 2019 preview of that whole Belmont card was uh, one of the best things that I did in the early part of my channel. And unfortunately, we didn't get to have what I think is the greatest non Breeders' Cup stakes day this year, given the fact with COVID. But I would say that whole card, when we normally have all those grade ones with there's something for everyone in there. I talk about that. That's the race calendar, and I'm going to take an aside here and praise that. I praise that card every opportunity I get. There's something for everyone on that card. I love that card, and that's the one that I put a lot of emphasis in. And unfortunately, we didn't get to have all those races that we normally have, but I definitely say that I put a lot of emphasis on those races that we have on that Belmont Stakes Saturday card.
Yeah, and hopefully this year not only is it maintained that usual the 9 or 10 stakes races, but also hopefully people who already bought tickets get to go and they just don't give them away to a bunch of rich people. Okay, NYRA, thank you. All right, let's move on to something else. We're going to talk about past performances a little bit. Everybody knows them, everybody uses them, but when you look at PPs, Jack, what do you tend to drift toward first? And then, not maybe necessarily the same thing, but what do you think is the biggest thing on past performances?
Well, one thing that I hold in very high regard is success and volume of work over a track surface. So if a horse is very successful over a particular surface, I definitely take a lot into that. So for example, if there's a horse that wins every time they go to Keeneland, I definitely do key in on that and highlight it and say, and when this horse does this at this track, also at a certain distance. For example, you have a sprinter that runs over the many different sprint distances and even up to a 1 turn mile and even a 2 turn mile. But if a horse is particularly good at 6 furlongs or at 7 furlongs, I definitely do emphasize volume of work and continued success and consistency at a particular track, particular distance, and even a particular surface. That's obviously less common, but those three things definitely are things that I take in a very high regard. I'm not a big person for playing purely based on trainer, but obviously that does come into play. I'm not the biggest speed figure person. I don't like using speed figures to base everything. I'm also not the biggest person on time, but again, when my opinion is that I use times when I think that it does bear uh, outcome to the race, but also I do say that sometimes past performances can be a little bit deceiving. You see instances where the past performance will say a horse ran bad, and you actually watch the race, and the opposite's the case, and vice versa. It'll say a horse ran good, and that horse may not have run as good as the past performance would have indicated. But definitely, I think the thing that's most important for me is success at the distance, success on the surface, and success at the racetrack that the particular horse is running at.
I just thought of a little quick impromptu question here. What's your favorite brand of past performances?
I use Equibase for everything. I'm a very cheap person. I don't pay for anything else. I go through individually and get all the when I'm previewing a race, I take one horse and I pull out all the PDFs of every single chart that I'm going to reference that they've had in the race. So Equibase is where I go.
I don't use Equibase the most, but it is my favorite. I'll just say that. A little bit of a different question now. Obviously, Corona, we haven't been able to go to the tracks much this year. I only went one time to a track, that was Monmouth. When you do go to the track, though, Jack, where's your favorite place to sit? Upstairs, along the rail, before the finish line, after the finish line, right on it?
I always like having a seat in the grandstand. That's, I like interacting around the racetrack and going everywhere. But at the end of the day, I love having the seat in the grandstand, being able to see everything happen, and actually being able to sit down and getting a break for a little bit. Because standing for a while could be a little bit tiring.
I'm glad you said that. NYRA, please listen to him. Thank you very much. And then the last, under the more interesting category, best well-known person you've had an interaction with, whether it be at the track, whether it be doing an interview. I know you've done several of those. I'm not saying who's the most well-known person, but of those well-known, who did you have the best interaction with?
Well, I guess I could go two different ways with this. I would think, in terms of my interviews, I have been very privileged to be able to interview a lot of people, and I am very grateful for all those people that I've been able to interview and be able to develop a relationship with. I'd have to say that Jay Privman, in terms of my interviews, it is probably my favorite person that I've been able to meet in terms of this. But if I were to say an impromptu person that I hadn't met before I saw them in a particular place, I did meet Craig Perrette last year when he was finally inducted to the Hall of Fame in 2019, and he was very gracious to me. I didn't really get the opportunity to introduce myself or anything else, but I did get to shake his hand. And I would say probably Craig Perrette would be in terms of an informal interaction with a person who doesn't necessarily know me. But in terms of the interview and the podcast side of things, Jay Privman would definitely be my person.
That's cool. Privman is the national correspondent for the Daily Racing Form, if you guys don't know. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to tackle category number 3, and this is the most controversial one. We're going to talk a little bit about the 2020 year-end Eclipse Awards, which will be coming up later this month. But instead of me sharing my opinions, because I think I'll be putting them out on Twitter anyway, we're just going to ask Jack who he thinks should win for a bunch of different categories. So if you want, I'll ask you the categories, or you can just go yourself. It's up to you.
You can go. You can go through the categories for me because I don't have them all in front of me, and I'm sure I would forget one on the spot.
Okay. I guess if you want to do 2-year-olds, we could do 2-year-olds. I don't really care about those awards that much because we pretty much know who they're going to be, but you could take over if you'd like.
Yeah, so in terms of 2-year-olds, I mean, we know who's going to get the Eclipse Awards. I think it's unfortunate that Breeders' Cup, or not Breeders' Cup, that Eclipse Award writers don't really take into account any horses other than the winners of the Dirt, Juvenile, and Juvenile Fillies races. I think if you were to rank just 2-year-old fillies, regardless of surface, Aunt Pearl is definitely the best of the 2-year-old fillies, regardless of surface. But we all know Vequist is going to get it, and that's fine. 2 Grade 1 wins. She beat all the best dirt fillies in the Breeders' Cup, so I have no issue with her getting it. But I would say that, she's not the best 2-year-old filly, but we know she's going to get it. Same thing with Essential Quality, even though I do think that he's the best of all the 2-year-olds going the distance. Jackie's Warrior is probably the most talented, but he didn't win the Breeders' Cup, and obviously we need the best horse with the undefeated record of the Breeders' Cup win to get the Eclipse Award, with the logic that the writers have now.
Yeah, and I totally agree that the Breeders' Cup should not mean everything, and a year-end award should take into account the whole year. I get it; they're the sports championship, but they're also just another race too. We need to keep that in mind, and not all horses have the talent for going a particular distance. Especially in today's game, you're shortening all these big races, and then you're saying, oh, we still need to take into account the longer distance horses more. So it's kind of a little dichotomy there that I don't understand. All right, let's keep going in order. 3-year-old male, 3-year-old filly. These are pretty easy as well.
Yeah, 3-year-old male, authentic, has checked all the boxes. 3 Grade 1 wins, post Santa Anita Derby, Haskell, Kentucky Derby, and Breeders' Cup. I did reference the Santa Anita Derby, so I thought it was three. Did make a mistake there. 4 Grade 1 wins for him, but he has everything. Unfortunately, I think both Andrew and myself were hoping that Tis the Law would be the one that would have this award, but unfortunately, did not work out that way. Swiss Skydiver should win the Eclipse Award, and I have no doubt that she would. I did think for a little bit that there may be some shenanigans with people thinking that Gamine should get it, given the fact that she won a Breeders' Cup and Swiss Skydiver didn't finish in the money. But I think the Preakness win is going to balloon Swiss Skydiver, because if there's one thing that we know that matters more than Breeders' Cup in terms of the average writer's opinion, it's a Triple Crown win, and Swiss Skydiver, a filly winning a Triple Crown race. I think that would have been enough to balloon her if she didn't win a Grade 1 race against females. But we know that she had a Grade 1 win in the Alabama, so that's not a knock against her. But Swiss Skydiver authentic really isn't that hard for the 3-year-olds.
She was also all over the country throughout the year. She had an incredible campaign, and if you could say anything about authentic, look, if I were a voter, I would have to vote for him because it's the only logical answer. But the two races where he beat Tis the Law, he didn't run the best race in the Derby. Tis the Law ran a better race, covered more ground. And in the Classic, he got a joke of an easy lead. So you do have to keep those things in mind, but he did get the job done both times. And he made his own good trip by Johnny V putting him up there. He did
Absolutely.
absolutely nothing wrong. Older dirt male.
Older dirt male, again, this is pretty simple. Improbable has his 3 Grade 1 wins. Hollywood Gold Cup, even though that wasn't against any horses that I have any respect for. The Whitney, again, was, I think, in two of his 3 Grade 1 wins, he was the benefit of circumstances, but does have the 3 Grade 1 wins, did win very convincingly over Maximum Security in the Awesome again, and then went on to run the good second in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He ran the best race of anyone that didn't win, so it should be him. There's really no one else that has enough consistency to be able to argue that they deserve the Eclipse Award. So Improbable is going to get it, and I really don't have an issue with that.
I mean, there's always Tacitus, isn't there?
maybe this year will be the year he finally gets his grade.
Older dirt female.
Again, this is very, very cut and dry. I don't need to drag this out. Monomoy Girl came back from her 18-month layoff. Impressive enough that she was able to come back and still be able to get a Breeders' Cup championship in her. Didn't really face that much good company this year in the race where we expected her to be tested. Swiss Skydiver was compromised at the start, but can't really fault her for things outside of her control. Monomoy Girl is obviously the winner of this and is very likely going to be it.
Well, now things finally start to get interesting. Champion Sprinter.
This is one of the two divisions where there's a lot of debate over, and there's not any kind of clarity because there's several different ways you can go with it, and I don't think either way is perfect. You've got the Breeders' Cup winner Whitmore, who was very inconsistent throughout the year. Does not have a Grade 1 win pre-Breeders' Cup, and got beat several times against top company, but does have the big shiny Breeders' Cup win. Did win a graded stake prior to the Breeders' Cup, but that was a Grade 3 at Oaklawn. Again, that was against most of the best sprinters at the time that were running, but that was I don't love giving it to Whitmore just because he won the Breeders' Cup. The other option is you've got Vekoma, who has the best resume of a sprinter, the 2 Grade 1 wins in the Carter and in the Met Mile, but didn't finish out the year. And I think that's why a lot of people are hesitant to give it to Vekoma. And, you don't really have a 3-year-old that it has a strong case for it. I think if Nashville had gotten the job done in the Malibu, you may have been able to make that case. But I think this is a situation where there's no one way that's going to make everyone happy, because there would be years in both ways. I would say you can't give it to the horse just because they won the Breeders' Cup, and you can't give it to the horse because they didn't finish out the year. But in this situation, we got to pick between the two. I would honestly say I have to default to the horse that I think is better on talent, and I think that horse is Vekoma.
I'm not going to say anything more than what you said, other than I completely agree. Do you want to do female sprinter or skip over that one?
Female sprinter, that's going to be Gamine, and again, she was very impressive in all her races going 1 turn. Only time she lost was going 2 turns in the Kentucky Oaks. Very impressive in the test, very impressive in the Acorn, and very impressive in the Breeders' Cup. Really no debate to be had there. She's going to take that home, and really no issue.
Okay. Maybe I'd vote for somebody else. I'm assuming you know who that is. Now, I've seen a lot of debate about this one, and it's not the one that you're thinking of. The one you're thinking of is coming right after that. Male turf horse.
Male turf horse, again, there was not a real consistent leader of the pack this year, but I think, the end of the year body of work for Channelmaker should give it to him. But I can understand why there are people who would be very hesitant to give it to Channelmaker, because the early part of the year was not that good. But I think at the end of the day, he's got more Grade 1 wins than anyone else. And I hate to use that argument that he's got more Grade 1 wins than anyone else. But when we have an American turf division that's as inconsistent as this one was, I think you could default to him. I realize that there are better 3-year-olds than him, but I don't know that I could justify giving it to Domestic Spending. And I feel bad saying that, because Domestic Spending had a really good year. Defoe also really talented, but I think you got to give it to Channelmaker. The Breeders' Cup run that he had is what really sold me on him. If he had run poorly in the Breeders' Cup, then I would probably say give it to one of the 3-year-olds. But I've been thinking he deserves this Eclipse Award since that Breeders' Cup. The 2 fillies that beat him were world-class Europeans. And I'm gonna hedge my bet here and say, and this may be contrary to what a lot of people think, but I would definitely give it to Channelmaker.
Oh, that's such a great opinion. That's a great opinion. This is the Channelmaker fanboy here, so I obviously am very happy with what you said. I won't say any more, and I agree. All right, now speaking of where the international horses might slip in, female turf horse. I'll let you say, and then I'll say if I agree or disagree.
I again, this is another thing that in most years I would say don't give the international horse the Eclipse Award just because they came over here and won a Breeders' Cup race. But if there were a year where this would happen, I would be okay with it this year. But Rushing Fall, and I'll spoil this, Rushing Fall was my favorite horse, who was currently in training, no longer in training. I really do like Rushing Fall. I was really hoping she would get there in the Breeders' Cup, and that was one of my really tough beats in the past Breeders' Cup. I would say against any American filly, she has it. And I would say I still going to say give the Eclipse Award to her. But if you say that Tarnawa ran really well in the Breeders' Cup and Rushing Fall didn't win, then I'll listen to you on that argument. But I would say you got to give it to, I would still say you got to give it to Rushing Fall, because you can't give it to the Europeans just coming over here and winning the Breeders' Cup one.
I'm honestly surprised you said this, and I'm very happy you said it, because I completely agree. This is an American award, and at the very least a North American award.
And
so
I will
stipulate.
I'm not taking bias into account there. If Tarnawa had multiple races, like if Tarnawa had run over here, say, this would have never happened, but just hypothetically, if she had won the Pegasus Turf or another race over here and was still a Group 1 winner in Europe, but had won the Breeders' Cup, if there had been something else over here, then I would say you give it to her. But because she just ran the one effort, And we've seen this before. Enable almost took the Eclipse Award away from Sister Charlie in 2018. I forget how close, but Enable came pretty close to taking it away from Sister Charlie. And I think there's a very strong chance that Tarnawa does get it, because Tarnawa won and Rushing Fall did not. And I know Enable's win was historic, and there would be a lot of, American writers that would be very, very recency biased by that and give it to her. But, Rushing Fall had a really good campaign over here. The she won her 2 grade ones this year fantastically. Jenny Wiley was very good, and then the run that she had against me, Mary, and the Diana was great. So I turned this into a defending Rushing Fall segment, but my opinion is you have to give it to Rushing Fall.
It's amazing that when they were going to give the Eclipse Award to Enable, she didn't get it. Obviously, Sister Charlie won. And then this year, that I'd be defending 2 Chad Brown horses. I usually don't do that, but yeah, I'm completely with you. Really, just 2 more categories. I'm going to skip owner, breeder, apprentice, steeplechase. Not that I think the voters should skip them. I think it's stupid that voters abstain. I think they should vote for every category. But for the purposes of this video, we'll skip them. Jockey and trainer. These are the last 2.
Jockey, I mean, there's many different ways you can go with jockey. The default would be you give it to IRAD. I don't really have a strong opinion on anyone. I don't, any jockey I think that gets it this year is well deserved, because there's many guys that have had very fantastic years. I think in terms of trainers, Chad Brown's monopoly over this award is finally over. I think that there are definitely some people that are going to vote to give it to Bob Baffert. There's some people who are going to vote to give it to Brad Cox. I think Brad Cox has had a better year than Bob Baffert, but Bob Baffert had champion 3-year-old male, champion older horse, and champion sprinter. And a lot of people, I think, are going to give strong consideration to Gamine for champion 3-year-old filly. So he's dominated a lot of the divisions. But I think the thing that's going to keep it away from Bob Baffert is, in whatever the standings of the allegations are, those are there. And a lot of people will be hesitant to give the Eclipse Award to Bob Baffert because of that. And, I think for that reason, you got to give it to Brad Cox.
Okay. I agree to an extent. I just want to bring something up because I don't know when the next time I'm recording a video is. I presume it's going to be soon. Just quickly, I'm very surprised that nobody at all, nobody I've seen put out their ballots even considered Christophe Clement, because he had one of the best years of his life, and he does everything the right way. And his success with first-time starters and with pretty much everything. He's got a pretty much even ROI this year, which is remarkable for a great trainer like him to have. So I think that he should have garnered some consideration by the voters. I haven't seen even one person put him third, which really upset me.
I will definitely comment on that, because that's something that's a shame that Christophe Clement is doing what, and I'm going to say this, fans all the time preach about how we want trainers to do the right thing. And someone like Christophe Clement is doing what I think every single person wants to see every single trainer do. And Christophe Clement doing that the right way, I'm not going to say it compromises him from having better horses, but Christophe Clement doesn't have a lot of big name horses. Obviously, he has the best, in my opinion, the best 3-year-old turf male from last year in Gaffo, and I think the best older turf male going into 2021. He's got him, and Gaffo didn't run in the Breeders' Cup, but would have been a strong factor if he had. But outside of that, he doesn't have a lot of big names, and while it's great what he does, people don't see it, and I think that's a true shame that people don't see what Christophe Clement does, because what Christophe Clement does is absolutely what this industry needs, and we need more people like Christophe Clement. So that's a very good point you make, and that's definitely a shame that no one is even giving him the credit. I know some people may have that don't publish their ballots, but definitely we need to take another look and look exactly who we're giving our praise to, and realize we got to shine some light on Christophe Clement. So very, very valid point that you made there, Andrew.
Well, I'm happy you agree, and I don't mean to interject, but I just wanted to say that I hope he does get some consideration. Well, now it is time for the last segment of the video. I'm stealing this from the SNL Jersey game show. Oh, this is the speed round. We're gonna ask you some speed round questions. Just answer very quickly. This will help get the viewers to know you a little bit more. Okay, favorite horse you've seen in person.
Rushing Fall.
Favorite horse you've been alive for and seen on TV.
Beholder.
Favorite horse of all time, regardless
Skip
of
away.
anything.
Skip away.
Favorite track.
I gotta say, it's no longer running, but my hometown Suffolk Downs, gotta say that.
Favorite type of race.
Favorite type of race. I love stakes races just because I love to be able to give opinions on them. So stakes races.
Dirt, turf, or poly.
I gotta go with dirt. There was Andrew and I had a little inside joke about polytrack before we got in here, so that just to explain why I was laughing at that.
Favorite type of bet.
I'm usually good with just a single wager, win, place, or show.
Favorite ADW, Advanced Deposit Wagering Platform.
Uh, gotta say, TVG because I use it. Even though I don't really have a strong affinity towards those apps that I use.
Favorite horse racing announcer.
I gotta say I love me some old style. Love me some old style Tom Durkin.
Yep, his signature hangs 3 feet from my bed every night. And lastly, a piece of advice for the average horse player.
Don't get discouraged because you will go through spells where you can't hit a race, and don't let that discourage you and say, I can't pick a winner anymore. I haven't picked a winner in 3 weeks on the show, and I'm just embracing it. So when those dry spells come, don't get discouraged.
Like I said on the introduction video to this series, folks, it's very tough to beat the game, especially when the takeout's against you. So
Actually, that's a lie. I've had one winner in 3 weeks, and a lot of those were losses in those stakes at Santa Anita, and that one winner was an even money favorite, or was an odds-on favorite. So, but
it counts. It counts.
yeah, it's a bit of a dry spell. The point is don't let the dry spells discourage you.
Very good information, Jack. And it was an absolute pleasure having you on today as my first guest on One Turn Route for the horses for the fans. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Nothing else except thank you for bringing me on, and very happy to do it. And hopefully 2021 ends up turning out better for the racing calendar than 2020 was.
Absolutely. And thanks for coming on and sharing all this great stuff with the audience. That's it, everybody. Thanks for watching. Remember, pay your bills first, and we'll see you next time.